So here we have the pelvic girdle. I'm going to start off with the piliopharemus. And the origin of it is the sacrum, right up here, and insertion is the greater trochanter, right down here. And what this does here is that it's the adductor and the extension of the hip joint. And when we move over here, I'm going to start off the gluteus maximus. The gluteus maximus is that the origin is the dorsal sacrum and then the lateral coccyx down the back right here. So that's the origin. And then the greater trochanter is where it inserts. And this one is lateral and extension of the hip and also the knee joint. Underneath we have the gluteus medius, and the origin of this one is the ilium surface, connects down to the greater trochanter right here. This is the abduction of the hip and it helps stabilize it. Gluteus minimus, then yet again, is on the ilium surface, connecting to the greater trochanter, and this is also an adduction for the hip and a stabilizer. So here we have tensor fasciae latae, or the ilio-tibia band, IT for short, and the origin for this one is the iliac spine right up in here, and then all the way down is the insertion will be the iliotibial tract. The tract will come all the way down here. You feel super tightness in here. And what this one does is that this one's the flexion and the internal rotation of the hip. Moving on into the front, the ilius right up in here. And the origin for this one is the iliac fossa. Your insertion down here is your lesser trochanter. And what this one does and helps with is the flexion and the extension of the hip. Now, moving over here is the fossa major, and your origins of this one will be T12 all the way down to L5. And then if you come down all the way into in here, you'll see this is the medial side of the lesser trochanter. And what this can help with is the bending of your lumbar spine up here. So here in front we have pectineus. Pectineus, the origin for this one is the pector pubis, and then the insertion of it is the pectineal linear line of the femur. And what this does is that is the adduction and internal rotation for the hip, and it also stabilizes the pelvis. Right underneath it right here we have the abductor longus. Now this one is connected to the medial side of the superior ramus, and then the insertion point for this one is the linear pectineal as well. What this does is that is the abduction and the flexion of the hip. Now when we come back to the back side, right up under here, we have the abductor brevis. And the abductor brevis, the origin for that is the inferior, so the back side of the ramus of the pubis. And that is also connected to the pectineal line of the femur. And what the brevis does is that is the abduction and flexion of the hip, and this also stabilizes the pelvis joint. And then the last but not least in this section right here, we have the abductor magnus. Now the magnus, that is also connected to the inferior side of the ramus, and then it comes all the way down here and is connected to the abductor tuberositer of the femur. This is part of, so what this does is the abduction and the extension of the pelvis. So here in front we have the sartorius, and the origin for this one is going to be the anterior, the front superior iliac spine, and that's going to connect all the way down here into your tibial tuberosity. And what this one does is that is the flexion and the abduction and the external rotation of the hip right in here, and then also it's going to be the flexion and internal rotation of the knee right like this. Over here, this other blue one here, the gracilis, gracilis, and this connects to your pubis symphysis, and all the way down here at the insertion side of it is going to be the medial, so the inside of your tibia. This is the adduction and the flexion of the hip, and then also it is also the flexion and the internal rotation as well for the knee. So let's talk about the hamstring group real quick. I'm going to start off with the bicep femoris. Up here, your origin point for this one is going to be your ischial tuberosity, and your insertion point down here is going to be your fibula, the head of your fibula. This is your bone that comes like right down along here. And what this one does is the flexion, okay, so that's the pullback and the extension of the rotational side of the knee. The semitendinitis is also going to be connected to your ischial tube, but down here it's going to be connected to your medial, the inside of your tibial tuberosity. And what this one does is the extension of the hip. It's going to stabilize the pelvis, and is the internal rotation. So I'm moving my knee in towards my other knee. Underneath it, we can see in here we got the semimembranitis, and this one also connects to your ischial tube. The medial tibial condyle is going to be the insertion. So right down here, you can see this right here, and this is going to be the external hip extension. Sorry, not the external, extension of the hip. It's going to stabilize the pelvis, just like the tendinitis, or the semitendinitis, and it's also the flexion and internal rotation of that knee. Now, moving on forward to the front side of it, we're going to talk about the quadriceps. I'm going to start off with the rectus femoris. Now, the rectus femoris, the connection to it is your inferior iliac crest, and that is connected to your down to your patella, which goes down to your tibial tuberosity as well. And with this one's going to be the flexion, so it's going to flexion of the hip and extension of the knee, so it's pushing the knee forward. So when you put your knee back, you flexion, forward, extension. Okay. Right beside it is the vastus lataris, and with this one, this is going to be on my greater tubular. Is this tubular? The greater it's the greater trochanter. Sorry, and this is going to be connected through my patella down to my tibial tuberosity. And what this one is that this is going to be the extension of the knee joint. So as I said before, back, flexion, forward, extension. Underneath it, we have the vastus intermedialis, and this one is connected to my interior side and lateral side of the femur, and then this is connected down to my tibial tuberosity. This is also the extension of the knee. And last of the group of the quadriceps is the vas medialis. Now the vas medialis is connected to the internal trochanterus line, so it's inside of it right here, and this is also connected to my tibial tuberosity. This is, like all the other three, is the extension of my knee. So let's talk about the lower leg for a second. So I'm going to start off at the back here at my gastrocnemius. There is a medial and a lateral, two of them side by side, and this will be connected to the condyle of my femur. This connects all the way down. Sorry, that's the origin. The insertion for this is my calicanal tendon, which moves all the way down here, which is also connected to my solus. So my solus. So the solus is connected to the posterior tibial and fibular, and this is connected, as I said, same as my gastrocnemius, to my canial tendon. This is going to be a plantar flexor. On the side here, I have my fibulus longus, and my fibulus longus is connected to the lateral side of my fibular bone, goes all the way down here, and is connected to my first metatarsal. This is going to be also a plantar flexor. Now, if we move over here, I'm going to start with my flexor hallucis longus. So hallucis being big toe, flexor longus. So this is connected to the posterior side of my fibula, comes all the way down here, and this is going to be connected to the base of my hallucis. This is going to be a flexor for my hallucis, my big toe, and also for my plantar. My tibialis posterior is connected to the medial of basically the middle of my fibula and my tibia, and this will come all the way down and connects to my second to my fourth metatarsal bones, and this is going to be a plantar flexor. Now, the last one at the back right here is my flexor digitorum longus, and this one is connected to the posterior side of my tibia, moving all the way down here. You can see it connects to my second to fifth phalanges, so my my digits right here. It's going to be a plantar flexion, and it's also going to flex each one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my phalanges. Now, moving into the front side of it, I'm going to talk about my tibialis anterior. This is connected to my tibial condyle, and then if you move all the way down here, following this, is unfortunately he's having a bad day right here. He is connected to my first phalange, or my first metatarsal, and this is going to be a dorsal flexion. Right on top of it, I've got the extension digitorum longus, and this extension digitorum longus is connected to the condyle of my tibia, and then it's connected to the base of my 4 digits. This is going to be the extension of those 4 digits. Now, underneath, the last one at the lower leg, we're going to talk about the extension of the hallucis longus. Now, this is connected, as you can see, into the medial, so the medial surface of the fibula bone. And if you follow it all the way down, this is connected to the distal part of the big toe, okay, my hallucis. This is going to be extension of that big toe. In the shoulder here, we start talking about the subraspinosus spinosus. The origin point of this one is going to be the fossa of your scapula. Scapula is right back here. See, this is your scapula here. And then your insertion point is going to be up here on the top. It's going to be the greater tuberosity of the humerus. And what this one's good for is the abduction of the arm. If we move right here, as we can see, is the infraspinosus, and that is also the origin point is going to be the fossa of your scapula, and the insertion point again is going to be at your greater tuberosity. This one is going to help with extension and rotation of that arm. If we come right up in here, underneath, we have the subscapularis, and this is also going to be on the fossa of your scapula, and it's going to connect into your greater tuberosity as well. Or sorry, not the greater one. It's going to be this is the lesser tuberosity, and this is going to do for lateral rotation and extension of that arm. So we move down here. I got the trace major, and the origin for this one is going to be the dorsal surface of the inferior angle of your scapula, and then the
the insertion point here is going to be the lesser part of your tuberosity of the humerus. And what this one is the internal rotation, the abduction, and extension of the arm. Now the trace minor, which is right here, and this one's going to be the insertion point is going to be the upper 2/3 of the lateral margin of the scapula, with the insertion point of your greater tuberosity here, and this is going to help with external rotation and adduction of the arm. Sorry. Let's move on to the run oboid major, and this one right here is major. Is going to be connected into T2 through T5 on your spinal cord, and then the insertion point on this one is going to be your scapula. This is going to be the inferior side of the spine, and what this is going to help out is with stabilization, external rotation, and elevation and internal rotation of that scapula. If we move down here, or move up to it, the rheumatoid minor that's going to be connected to C7 and T1, and with the insertion point of that one is going to be the medial margin of your scapula, and that's going to be the inferior side of the inferior side of the spine. And exactly the same as the major, this one's going to stabilize. It's going to keep the elevation and internal rotation of that scapula. And last but not least, we have the levator scapula, and this one is connected to C1 through C4. It's going to have like different connections all the way down here. There's like little points right there, and the insertion point for this one is going to be your superior angle right up here of your scapula. And what this one's going to help out with is going to be the flexion. Flexing. It's the flexing of the neck and the head. So the muscles at the back are going to start off with our deepest muscle, our spinalis. The spinalis is connected to T10 all the way down to L3, and it connects up to T2 to T8, and also to the base of the skull. This is going to help with the support and external and lateral flexion of the spine. Right beside it, next here is the longus minimus. The longus minimus is connected to your sacrum and also to your iliac crest, and this is actually connected to your costals, and the costals are going to be 2 down all the way to 12, and this one's going to help with external lateral flexion of the trunk and also of the head and the neck. And right beside it is the iliocostalis, and the iliocostalis is also connected to your sacrum and your iliac crest, connected to your costals as well, but this one's only going to be connected through 6 through 12. With this one, external abduction and rotation of the spine. So let's move on to the next layer after that is our saturatus posterior inferior. Okay, this is actually quite a large one. I just made it smaller on this. What this is connected to is my T11 through L3, and then onto my costals. I'm going to have it connected from 9 to 12, and this is going to help with my lower ribs. Moving up here, the superior of this one, the saturatus posterior superior, is connected right here, and it's going to be connected through my C7 through T3, and then on the ribs, my costals, I'm going to connect it through 2 through 5, and this one's going to help with the elevation of those ribs. Now, if I move a little bit up, I'm going to start off. I'm going to start with my spendiolus capitis. The spendiolus capitis. This was connected C3 to T3, and this one's going to be connected to my mastoid process, and this one's going to help with external lateral flexion of my head and my spine. And the little one right beside it is my semi-spinalis capitis, and this one's connected to my C3 to T6, and this one's actually connected to the occipital bone. And the same as the muscle right beside it is going to help out with lateral and extension, flexion of that head. And last two muscles of the back is the outers is my latissimus minimus dorsus. This one's got a lot of connections to it. It's going to be connected to the iliac crest. It's going to be connected T7 through T12, and then my costals 9. This is going to be the insertion. I'm saying 9 through 12. And then also, sorry, that's not insertion. That's still part of the origin. The insertion part of it is actually the lesser trochanter. No, the lesser tuberosity of my humerus. I just don't have it connected here. The extension, it's going to be extension, abduction, and rotation of that arm. And then it's also going to aid with my breathing as well. And then the biggest muscle of the back, this stretches all the way from the base of your skull, from C1 all the way down to T12, and it's going to move all the way out here. It's going to connect to both of my clavicles as well. It's going to utilize the whole back. Moving on to our abdomen here, we're going to start with the rectus abdominis, and your insertion point with this one is going to be your pubis and your pubic symphysis, and then your insertions are going to be your xiphoid process, that bone right in the middle of your chest, and then also the ribs are going to be connected to the 5 through 7 of those ribs, and this one's going to help with the compression of the abdomen and the stabilization of that pelvis. Underneath, we're going to talk about the external oblique. Now, your external oblique, this one's going to connect it to your 5 through 12 ribs, and then down to your pubic crest, and then your iliac crest as well. And it's going to be on the superior iliac spine, and this one's going to give you that like your abtone, like your six pack. The internal oblique, now that one's connected to your iliac crest as well, and your 9 through 12 of your ribs, and then other insertion is going to be your pubic crest. And this one's going to help with the rotation, the lateral movement of that trunk. Underneath, we're going to have the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis is going to be your origin is going to be, and this one's going to be your 7 through 12 ribs, and down to your iliac crest and your pubic crest as well. And this one's going to help with rotation, lateral flexion of that trunk. So moving on to the last two, I'll do the Sophius major. Sophius major is connected on the back here, and that's going to be connected through T12 through L5, and then it's going to come down onto your femur, which is in here is going to be your lesser trochanter. And what this one's going to help with is like your flexion of your hip, and then also the bending of this lumbar spine right here. And then the last one is your ilius. Now your ilius is connected to your iliac fossa and the crest, and then it comes down at the insertion point is going to be also the femur, and that one's going to be lesser trochanter of the femur. It's going to help with rotation of the hip. It's also going to help with like when you rise up of your trunk and from that supine position. So last on our thoracic, we have the internal and external costals. They are both connected with the inferior and superior of the margin of the ribs. These are going to help with the stabilization. Around the back, right here, your ceteris anterior. The origin points of these ones here is going to be your inferior superior of your ribs. So your 1 all the way down through your 9 of your ribs, and then the origin of that one is going to be your medial to marginal surface of your scapula back down here. And this one's going to help out with the rotation of the scapula, and it helps with the rising and lowering of the arms through the scapula. If we move on to the pectoris minor right here, so the pectoris minor, this one's connected through 3 through 5 of your ribs, your costals, and then it comes up to your coracoid process on your scapula. And what this one helps is with the pulling and the downwards movement of your scapula on your hand. Your pectoris major right here, This one is connected to it's got a couple of connections actually. It's like your clavicle, your sternum. It's also connected to your ribs. It's ribs 1 through 6. And then it's connected to the greater tuberosity of your humerus. And this one's going to help with the abduction, rotation, and also the flexion of that arm. And last one is your diaphragm. And your diaphragm has a lot of connections. And your diaphragm is connected to your xiphoid process. It's connected to your inner surface of your of your 7 through 12 ribs, and then it's also connected through your L3. The insertion point on this one here is going to be your central tendon of the diaphragm, and the diaphragm helps with the contraction to increase the interthoracic volume during inhalation. So here on the upper arm, the bicep brachial. We're going to talk about the long and the short together. The long is going to be connected to your superficial tuberosity of your scapula, whereas the short one will be connected to your coracoid process of your scapula. And they'll both come down for the insertion point for your radial on your radial bone of your tuberosity. These are going to help with the flexion of the elbow and also that rotation of the humerus. Your brachialis down here, the small little one right here, is actually connected to the anterior, the middle part of your humerus. It comes down to your coracoid process of your ulna bone, your ulna in your arm, and then that's also going to help with the elbow flexion and rotation, or it's not rotation, elbow flexion and the flexion also of the forearm. Small little one, where's it going? Keep using it. There it is. This one here is called the coracoid brachialis, and this one's connected to your coracoid process of your humerus, and then it's going to be connected to your coracoid process and then also to the frontal of the humerus. This one's going to help with the flexion, abduction, and then that rotation. On the back here, this big, there's three right here, is that your biceps, your triceps brachialis, your lateral, your medial, and your long. Your long is going to be connected up here to your tuberosity, all the way back into here of scapula, and then the lateral and the medial will be connected to the radial groove, and they all come down to connect to the process of the ulna. With the triceps long, this one's going to help out with the extension and the adduction of that shoulder, and then the three of them will all help out with the extension of that elbow. So your anterior forearm is going to be your deep muscles. I'm going to start off with the pronator quadriceps, and this one's connected to the anterior surface of your ulna and then your anterior surface of your radial, and this one's going to help stabilize the forearm. And then we move up to the flexor digitorum pronandus, and this one here is going to be connected to the anterior surface of your radius and then down to your first digit here, and this one here is going to help with the abduction of the wrist and then also with the flexion of that first digit. Your flexor digitorum superficialis, that's not right. This one's connected to your epicondyle of your humerus, and then it's going to come down here and it's going to connect to your 2 to your 5 of your digits of your phalanges, and that's going to help with the flexion of those 2 to 5 of those digits. And your supinator, which is out here on the side, this one's going to be connected to your lateral epicondyle of your humerus and then to the lateral side of your radius, and this is going to be help with suspension of the forearm. The flexor polleus down here, the flexor polleus longus, this is going to be connected to your lateral surface of your radius, and then it's also going to go all the way down for the insertion point of the inner side of your palm of your first digit. And then this one's going to help with the abduction of the wrist and then the flexion of your first digit.